Welcome back to the Double Leg. I'm one half of the show, Hey Jai Picks. The other half of the show, the Parlay. Joining me in to break down some UFC 294. It is here. Let's get it. Been waiting for this card for a while, and then we go and have two fight changes, a couple of short notice replacements, two of the best in the game. Alexander Volkanovski stepping in to take on Makhachev, Usman stepping in to take on Chimaev. A wild week it was in the past 7 days, and here we are finally on UFC 294 fight week. A great card, pay-per-view in Abu Dhabi. What do you think of the card overall?
All I got to say is props to the UFC for keeping this thing alive because, those 24 hours when Charles dropped and then Paulo Costa, like that could have been a disaster. You got an Abu Dhabi card, pay-per-view, the October event that's always massive. You think back to last year, how big that card was. This one was good, and then it just looked like it was falling apart. But to get Volkanovski and Usman, two of the all-time greats, to get in on 10 days short notice and fight, I don't know if it makes the card better or worse or what, but it makes it super interesting because these matchups are going to be fun. I can't wait.
Yeah, I thought I was in some type of bad dream when I was getting the news that Charles Oliveira had to pull out. I was like, there's no way that this is happening 10 days before the fight. And I was like, is this card going to fall apart? And then we get Volk. I'm like, all right, I'm sold again. And then at the time, we thought Paulo Costa was possibly still going to be able to fight. He can't. And then, who's going to fight Khamzat? Usman steps up. Shout out to him. And some people, don't think it's a big deal for these guys to step in because they don't have anything to lose. But, dude, nobody wants to fight Khamzat. And not many people want to fight Islam. But these two guys stepped in, and props to them for doing so because we are going to be entertained come Saturday afternoon because it is an early start time. So if you're watching this, keep that on your radar. Prelims start at 10 a.m. Eastern, and I believe the main card will start at 1 a.m. Eastern. So keep that on your radar. You don't want to miss them. And we got 13 fights lined up. Pretty good card overall. From top to bottom, we're starting off with a good middleweight bout. The debut of Putin Magomedov. The featured prelim, Muhammad Yahya, it's Tim Elliott, Muhammad Mokaev, and then a solid main card as well. So we're going to go through, break them down, give you our leans, our picks. They're not our official bets. If you want our official bets, hop in the Double Leg Premium. The link is in the description for that. Gets you every single UFC card every week for less than $1 a day. You get every bet we have on every single UFC card. No more Contender Series. Unfortunate. I love that. But here we are. We're back on the UFC grind. And looking forward to it. We got UFC 294. Let's start it off with the main event. Islam Makhachev coming in at minus 255 against Alexander Volkanovski, sitting at plus 205. Over under 4.5 rounds, minus 180 for the over, plus 150 for the under. The lightweight title bout. Volkanovski going for it again in the rematch. Not exactly how he wanted it. Probably would have liked to see both guys on a full camp, but Volk taking it on 10 days notice, and he's going for it again. I don't know how this one's going to play out officially, but it's going to be a great scrap. You see the betting lines there. I believe Islam was like minus 350 around that in the first fight, so it drops down a little bit. He obviously won the first fight by a unanimous decision. Some would say it was a robbery. Every time I go back and watch, I find it to be Islam's fight for the win, but it was a close fight. A lot of those rounds were kind of subjective, especially early in the fight. Obviously, Volk taking round 5, and then it was kind of a feeling out period. Going into this one, with Volk taking it on 10 days notice, knowing that he can hang with Islam, I have a feeling he's going to come out a little bit hotter, especially knowing, the gas tank might not be as good as he would with a full camp, and just the way that he ended the fight, he's probably going to come out a little bit more aggressive. I wonder what adjustments Islam's going to make coming into this one. If you watch that fight, the grappling wasn't super effective. It was a lot of standing and striking with Volk early on in the fight, especially. And when he did get him to the ground, couldn't really do much with the submissions, the top control. Round 4, he had his back, couldn't really do much with it. I know a lot of people would say that's Volkanovski's round because he was landing those shots to Islam from his back, but I think you got to give it to Islam. Going into this one, it's like I'm not sure exactly what we're gonna get, but I broke it down as best as I could as far as what I think Volk's gonna do. I don't know what Islam's gonna do. That's really what it comes down to. Is he gonna look to grapple more, knowing that Volk is dangerous on the feet and wants to make it a little bit more or a little bit less subjective based off of that? I don't know. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, so interesting, man. So I've been thinking about this fight since it got announced. 10 days short notice is kind of the one thing that is holding me back from really hammering Volk here. I know he's the champ, and I keep thinking that 10 days notice isn't really going to affect him. He's always ready, he's always training, but I think it affects him to some degree, maybe in the later rounds. But from a standpoint of looking at the last fight between these two, I think there's more to like from Volkanovski than Islam here. I mean, Islam had success early in the fight. He looked pretty good, but Volk also tagged him a few times, had him stumbled. And then later in the fight, especially the 5th round, Volkanovski gets on top after knocking him down, was landing ground and pound. Islam was clearly done. Like he, was not done to where he was going to give up, but he was tired into the fight. If there's another round there, I think Volkanovski has a legitimate shot to finish it. So I think from a confidence standpoint, Volkanovski is going to have all the confidence. He knows what he needs to do here. I think he's felt the power. He's felt the strength of Islam now once. So coming into this fight, I think he fights a little different. I think in the first fight, he fought a little too defensively. I mean, rightfully so, right? Islam's one of the best grapplers in the UFC, let alone 155, a division that you're not accustomed to, and you're not fighting guys that big because Islam's a big 155er. Now that he's felt that strength and power, I think he's going to fight coming forward more in this fight because when he did against Islam in the first fight, he had a lot of success. He landed some good shots. It was when he'd get backed up that Islam would be able to get his hands locked and either take him down or stall him up against the cage. But yeah, Islam knows that Volkanovski can hurt him. Islam knows that Volk can control him on the ground too if Volk gets on top. So I'll be interested to see how that gas tank holds up for Volk. I think it holds up well most of the fight. It's just the last round probably that makes me nervous here. Overall, though, I was telling you before the fight, like when's the last time, or if you're ever again going to get Volkanovski at plus 200 odds in the UFC? Like it's not going to happen. Just it's Islam. He's beat him already once, and that's why the odds are the way they are. Plus the short notice, but I just feel like if you're betting, it's almost the automatic Volkanovski bet at this point. I mean, plus 200. I know I'll probably be taking it just because. I mean, another thing is we've seen the craziest shit happen in the main events in the UFC in the last few months, and this would be no different here. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. I'm going to be rooting for Alexander Volkanovski. I hope he gets the finish. I'm going to have a bet on him, and I'm going to pick him to win the fight too. I think he's got that confidence wave he's going to be riding. As far as who's closer to that, great status right now, it's Volk. And I was looking earlier today at their records. Volkanovski, all those wins in the UFC, Max Holloway 3 times, Yahya, I mean, all these guys he's beaten. Then you look at Islam's path to the title. Bobby Green, Thiago Moises, Dan Hooker. I mean, yeah, you beat Volk in a super razor close fight. But, didn't look the best or like you had against other opponents that weren't up to that level. So I think this is a close fight, plus 200. Give me Volk.
Yeah, just based off of the betting odds, like you watch the first fight, it's clear the betting odds were not accurate. Like Volk should have been a lot more respected by the betting odds. He was like plus 300, plus 330, somewhere around there. It looked more close to like an even fight. And then coming into this one, he's plus 200. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the betting odds, like it's looking really good on the Volk side. And the way he's got to go about this, I already said he's got to be aggressive. I think he's going to be aggressive. Game plan wise, the way he had success against Makhachev was like, if he can back him up, it goes with that, like any kind of wrestler. I know Islam is a very solid striker, but if he can back him up against the cage, keep him on the cage, not necessarily like have to press him against the cage or anything like that, but just keep Islam's back to the cage, he's going to be very uncomfortable. And if you just look at any tape on Islam, when he's backing up, he can get hit. It's not really his forte. He has some good counters with that left hand, but if you can get him up against the cage, feint at him, try to pull those counters out of him, and then counter him. Volkanovski is one of the better guys at it. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really tough one because I hate going against Islam, and I was prepared to possibly do that with Charles Oliveira, but we're getting Volkanovski here at plus 205 for the pick. I'll take him for the pick. I'm going to be rooting for him as well. But Islam, he's just a scary dude. I'm interested to see how he bounces back because we haven't seen him since that fight. Like we've seen Volk since that fight. He looked on another level against Yahya. This is his first fight back since then. And he's getting Volk on 10 days notice. Like it's a completely different opponent than Charles. So it's a tough fight for him to take on 10 days notice as well. I know he's probably more in shape, probably a little bit more prepared physically, but mentally that's got to be a little bit different too. So yeah, I'll take Volk for the pick. I know a lot of people will probably be rooting for him. I'm interested to see where these betting splits are at. If everyone's just going to be hammering Volk at plus 200. But yeah, I'll take him and we'll move on. Co-main event, Kamaru Usman coming in at plus 220 against Khamzat Chimaev, sitting at minus 280. Over under 2.5 rounds, plus 125 for the over, minus 155 for the under. The return of Khamzat Chimaev. It's been over a year. And the last time we saw him was against Kevin Holland. And he just completely decimated him, hit him with the fake glove touch, shoot the takedown, and from there it was just a scramble fest. Ultimately found the submission. Kamaru Usman lost the title fight against Leon Edwards back in March. 36 years of age for him. That's obviously a concern. The health is a concern. 3-2 in his last 5, both losses coming to Leon Edwards. Taking the fight on short notice, as everyone knows. But this is going to be a controversial one as well because you look like the last fight we just broke down. You're like Volkanovski at plus 200. It looks amazing. Usman at plus 200 also looks amazing. But then he's going to get up against Chimaev. He's off 2 losses. He's 36. He's got the health issues. So I could somewhat see why Khamzat is this big of a favorite. But even then, it's like a little bit tempting to take Usman because if this fight is standing, Usman has shown over the years his striking is pretty dang good. And Khamzat obviously going to be looking to take the fight to the ground. If he can't do that, it might start to look like a little bit more of an even fight. What are you looking for in this one?
Yeah. First of all, another fight that I wish we could get both guys at a full camp. Both these guys fighting at 185 for the first time in the UFC is interesting. I would say Khamzat, his build, he's longer. He just seems like, I know Kamaru's jacked and stuff, but he's more of a, he's not as long as Khamzat. I just feel like Khamzat is going to look a lot bigger at 185 than Usman is. I know they're the same height, but I just have a feeling Khamzat probably could be a little bit stronger here too. Younger. Kamaru Usman, a lot of wear and tear on the knees especially. And then you mix in 10 days notice with that. It's like, did you really have, is 10 days enough to prepare for Khamzat? Because I don't really think Khamzat was on Usman's radar, being the fact that, Khamzat basically was forced to go up to 185. I don't think Usman really thought Khamzat would drop down to 170 and they would fight anytime soon. But, now it's here. They're fighting each other. I was telling you before this, like, this is the first time that Kamaru Usman is going to have to fight this style of a fight. Like, normally he's the one pressing forward, looking for the takedowns, the control time. But, here he's going to have to worry about defending that against Khamzat. I think Khamzat's going to be way more explosive here. I think he will look for takedowns on Kamaru just to prove a point that he's the better wrestler here. And, if it stays on the feet, that's when it's going to get interesting. But overall, if this is a full camp, I think Usman has a better chance. But Khamzat just seems like that, he's that next level fighter, that Kamaru was back in the day. This fight reminds me a lot of Kamaru going in against Tyron Woodley and fighting him when when he got the title from him and kind of went on that long title reign. It almost seems like a passing of the torch. both guys somewhat similar styles, dominant wrestlers. I do think Khamzat wins this fight, but if Kamaru can keep it on the feet, which is weird to say, like Kamaru Usman, can he keep a fight on the feet? Because we always, we never really see him on the defense. Then it's going to get interesting because he's got all the experience fighting guys like Colby Covington for 5 rounds on the feet. Leon Edwards on the feet in the last fight for the most part. Khamzat doesn't really have that. A little bit against Gilbert Burns, but for the most part, Khamzat is ragdolling dudes from the get-go, finishing the fight, knocking him out with 1 punch, submitting him early. If he gets into a war with a dude like Usman, I think it's going to be a little different than the Gilbert Burns fight. I think Usman will be more disciplined than Gilbert Burns was. Gilbert was a little wild, landed some good shots, but a little wild. I think Usman will really get the jab going and fight a technical standing fight against Khamzat. And if Khamzat starts to fade or get a little tired, I could see Usman having a lot of success, especially. But overall, I just think Khamzat's going to be too explosive for him, honestly, especially on 10 days' notice, being this stage of Kamaru's career. 5 years ago, probably taking Usman here. But I just don't see him pulling it off against Khamzat unless, Khamzat does fade because he empties the gas tank early or something. But I expect a good fight, at least for the first half. I'm going to take Khamzat, though. I got to stick with him. I can't pick against him here.
Yeah, it's really tough to pick a guy who's undefeated and has looked, like the next champion. Like it's almost like a lock. He's going to be a champion in the future. First fight at middleweight for Usman. And like you said, I do think Khamzat will be the bigger guy. I do think he's probably more cut out to be a middleweight. And at 170, it was like, how does this guy ever make 170? He's so big and so strong. And I kind of, for his first or like his move up to middleweight, for him to get an actual welterweight is probably like a good thing. Because I was a little concerned going up against like Paulo Costa. Like Paulo Costa is a big dude and has actually, struggled to make 185. So I was a little concerned for that. I think this is a little bit better for him as far as, the size goes and Usman's age. And you look at, he's got that crazy 90%, 97% takedown defense. But, who's really trying to take down Usman? Most people are trying to keep it on the feet. And the guy's majority of his like takedown defenses are against Colby Covington. In the second fight, he went 0 for 11. And then Damian Maia back in 2018, who went 0 for 15. Other than that, like guys will shoot like maybe once during the fight, but they're not really trying to take the fight to the ground. I think Khamzat is like just such on a different level of an athlete than a Colby Covington or Damian Maia. Like Colby Covington's a kind of grind you out type style, type wrestler. He's not going to shoot explosive takedowns to get you down. Damian Maia kind of the same way, much less of a wrestler than Colby Covington. So going into this one, I'm like, Khamzat's just too explosive. I do think his best path here is to use that to his advantage. Like go after him early. It's only a 3-rounder. Blitz him from the start. Don't let him get into a groove to where he's like, all right, I'm building into this fight to where I can start landing the jab. I can keep you at distance with that jab. You make you a little bit scared to shoot a takedown. If Khamzat comes out like he normally does and just, shoots a explosive double leg and can get it, or at least eventually get it, even against Kevin Holland, he didn't get it completely, but he eventually got it. The transitions are looking really good for Chimaev on the ground. I think he wins this fight. But Usman, he's not like the easiest guy to finish. So if he does get it to the ground, can't finish it, might look a little sketchy. But I think Khamzat, with it being a 3-rounder, should be able to last the full 3 rounds and get a win. How much is he if he can finish him? Because if he can go out there and finish Usman, I get it's on 10 days notice, but if he can finish Usman, like if he can make him look similar to the guys that he's been putting away, like this guy's going to be on another level as far as, the star power goes. And this is the title eliminator, I guess, for the middleweight division. So I would probably think that's why Usman's taking this fight. He's like, okay, I just lost 2 title fights at 170. Do I want to face one of these up and comers at welterweight? Probably not. I'll take this short notice fight at 185. If I win, I get another title shot. That's probably somewhat of a smart move for Kamaru. So Yeah, Chimaev's going to be the pick. Don't think Kamaru gets this one done. But yeah, it's going to be a great fight. I'm excited to see how it works out.
Last two things I'll say about this one. First is that Kamaru's done this before with Abu Dhabi, short notice fight against Jorge Masvidal. It went over there and looked good. And then, as far as where these guys are in their career and how good they are, like I think we know what we're getting with Kamaru Usman. We've seen him however many times in the UFC. Like we know exactly what we're getting, what skill level, everything. But Hamzat's younger, hasn't been doing it in the UFC that long, and hasn't fought as often. Like Hamzat's the type of guy that's probably continuously improving on different aspects of his game, like striking and all of that. So that's a scary thought too. That if he keeps improving at a high rate, I think Kamaru could be screwed and other opponents in the future too. So a lot of interesting stuff around this one.
Yeah, and he had that kind of a brawl with Gilbert, so he might take it back a little bit if he starts to get in a brawl. He's been there before. Maybe he's matured a little bit to where he doesn't, just start hucking bombs when he's, should be able to beat the guy. So, yeah, looking forward to it. Light heavyweight bout, Magomed Ankalaev sitting at minus 360 against Johnny Walker, who's coming in at plus 260. Over under 1.5 rounds, minus 165 for the over, plus 135 for the under. You see the height there for Johnny Walker and the reach, 82-inch reach. The guy is an absolute unit at 205. He's going to be bigger than most guys. Ankalaev going to be at a 7-inch reach disadvantage. His last fight was nearly a year ago, 10 months, I believe. It was the championship bout against Jan Blachowicz, which ended in a draw. And a lot of people think he won. A lot of people think Jan won. Comes out to a draw. And here we are. He's facing Johnny Walker, who's looked pretty dang good over his last few fights. He's on a 3-fight win streak. And his last fight against Anthony Smith looked a little bit more matured. I mean, a lot of people know him for being explosive, a lot of early finishes with the flying knees and just the explosive athlete that he is. Against Anthony Smith, he took a little bit slower, chopped at the leg, and looked a little bit more technical. I don't know if that's good or bad. This is a 3-round fight. I think he needs to use that explosiveness somewhat to his advantage, but then he's also got the tools. Like, he's so long, and he's actually getting a lot more technical that, like, he could maybe win a technical bout here against Ankalaev. So he's a live dog, but what are you seeing on this one?
Yeah, he just can't get clipped. And if he doesn't, I think he's going to have success on the feet. I really do. Like, that's a big reach advantage. 6'6" is an imposing figure to stand across from and to find your range against. Like, even though he's got the reach advantage, I mean, trying to punch up at 6'6", even though, I mean, Magomed's 6'3", but he's not like a long 6'3". Like, he fits pretty perfect into his height and build and everything. I mean, Walker looks like a towering, long, basketball player in there who's athletic, and his striking slick. He hits guys from weird angles, and when he mixes it up and gets really crafty and creative on the feet, he throws some shots that have a lot of sting on them, some kicks that are good. And I kept watching the fight with Jan and Magomed in their last bout. And if Johnny Walker can mix in the leg kicks like he did against Anthony Smith, the same way that Jan Blachowicz did in that fight, I think that's first and foremost in that first round. Establish those kicks, do a little bit of damage, and then work from there. Because if Magomed isn't taking damage and has his legs under him this whole fight, I think he's going to be able to close the distance at times, get his hands locked. Even if he doesn't get a takedown, put him up against the cage and make this fight in close quarters where Johnny can't use the reach and he can't use the kick in space and distance. Because if Magomed stands at range with Walker, for one, he's going to be hard to hit. For two, Walker has a lot of power when you give him that much room, especially with the right hand. He can cover a lot of distance really fast to where Magomed probably couldn't reach him. So that's interesting. In 3 rounds, Johnny doesn't have to worry about pacing himself as much, like it's a 5-round main event. And if he fights at the same pace he did against Anthony Smith, I think it's a close fight. If he can just ramp it up a little bit more, it gives himself a better chance. Because Magomed, he will go to the wrestling, not all the time and not always successfully, but there's been some fights where he gets tagged and he uses that wrestling pretty good, like against Nikita Krylov. gets tagged a few times, goes and gets a couple of takedowns to kind of offset that. Same thing, with oh, sorry, in the Jan Kudalaba fight too, the first one or the second one, sorry. Yeah, first round fight KO, but he mixed in the takedowns well. He kind of took some. I think he was trying to take the power and take some of the aggressiveness out of Kudalaba early, and he did just that and ended up working out and he gets the TKO. So if he can get the Johnny Walker's, if he can get Johnny Walker on the ground early in this fight, the better off he's going to be. Because if he can't and Johnny Walker keeps it at space, as an underdog, I think Johnny Walker's got a good chance to win, especially a decision, because I think his punching, his striking is going to look better than Magomed Ankalaev's, and he's going to land more frequently too. So I want to take a chance on the dog here, but man, Magomed is tough too. He's going to be hard to put away. And again, I don't think he's going to necessarily gas out on the course of a 3-round fight here. So, man, it's almost a no bet situation. Just sit back and enjoy, or it's dog or pass here. But I'm looking forward to this one. Honestly, I've liked the resurgence of Johnny Walker in his last 3 fights. This is definitely, in my opinion, a bigger step up in competition than his last 3 fights here. But if he can make it close, it should be fun.
Yeah, most likely I'm going to play this as a dog or pass because the things I don't like about Ankalaev, and it kind of comes down to a lot of these, Dagestani strikers, because Ankalaev doesn't shoot that many takedowns. He's really content to stand and strike with you. And honestly, I think his best path to victory here would be to use the takedowns, but he just hasn't really shown that's his go-to. So the thing I don't like about him is he's not super high volume on the feet, and based on that Jan fight, like, he was losing those early rounds and nearly went down in round 3 with those leg kicks. And he basically was like, shit, I need to use my wrestling here. Otherwise, I'm going to get finished with these leg kicks. So I don't really like it for Ankalaev at that price. I know a lot of people have been high on him over his career, me being one of them. But that Jan fight really scares me for Johnny Walker, just being how long and athletic he is. I think it's probably a dog or pass. The only concern with Walker is that chin. Like, he's been knocked out numerous amount of times. And if he exposes himself, Ankalaev does have the power to put him out. So that's what it comes down to for me. I'm going to take Johnny Walker for the pick. But basically just comes down to a dog or pass in this situation. Middleweight bout, Ikram Aliskerov coming in at minus 435 against Warley Alves, sitting at plus 335. No over-under out yet on this one. Warley Alves stepping in for Nazardine Imavov, who had to pull out of this fight due to visa issues. So he was a 170er. He's moving up to 185, and he's been around for a little bit of a time here. Ikram Aliskerov's second fight in the UFC. The debut looked pretty dang good against Phil Hawes, knocked him out in the first round. He's 14-1, only lost to Hamza Chimaev, another Dagestani on the card, coming in as a big favorite. I think it's pretty warranted in this spot, considering Alves taking it on short notice. Warley Alves hasn't looked too great as of late. It almost looks like he's older than his age. At 32, it looks like he's a little bit older. He's been knocked out twice in his career, been submitted once. Last time out, lost a split decision against Nicholas Dalby, UFC 283, which should not have been a split decision. That should have been a unanimous decision. But either way, he's on back-to-back losses. Before that, got knocked out by Jeremiah Wells. Not really that many notable wins. His most notable win was Colby Covington, and that was back in 2015. Since then, I mean, he's fought Brian Barberena, Kamaru Usman. Lost to both those guys. Notable wins, not many. I mean, I'm looking at these names like, okay, maybe Sergio Moraes, Munir Lazez, not in the UFC anymore. He's not really beating these guys. So I think Aliskerov, considering the film that he does have, he looks pretty dang good. And they were going to match him all with Paulo Costa. So they know this guy's ready for the better fighters in the division. Had him up against Imavov here. Imavov is levels above Warley Alves. I think Aliskerov gets this one done pretty easily. I think he probably knocks him out or submits him within the first round or two. What are you thinking? Am I right or no?
I think you're right. I just think Warley Alves can't keep the pace that these younger guys and these up and comers can. I mean, even though against Dalby he had some moments early in the fight, even Dalby's not a young guy and was able to push the pace on Warley Alves and just kind of overwhelm, tire him out and get the win that way. With Ikram though, he can push a good pace. He can also finish you by any means that he wants. I mean, with his only loss being Khamzat Chimaev, which was at this point, age is perfectly fine. And I was honestly hoping we'd see that rematch once Hamzat needed a new opponent. But I think he's got all the tools to do whatever he wants in this fight. I've never been too high on Warley Alves. I do think there could be chin issues here with Warley. I mean, 2 of his last 4 losses have come by knocked out, and he's been submitted by Randy Brown as well. And Ikram's a fighter who, if he finds a chin, he showed in his last fight against Phil Hawes, he'll put you out cold. And if he gets you to the ground or he uses his wrestling, he can submit you there in any way too. Kimura, rear naked choke. I mean, he's got him on his record. So, yeah, this one's pretty cut and dry to me. Not near as exciting as Nasruddin Imavov would have been. If Warley comes in here and wins, it's going to be in the first round. If it gets past the first round, this is Ikram doing whatever he wants his whole entire fight. And probably he's going to do that in the first round too, if I'm being honest. I like Ikram. I picked against him in his last fight, and he proved me wrong. And, I think he comes in here. This is a lesser opponent. And, I think he gets this win pretty easily. And it's going to be fun to watch because he's another guy, too, you look up in a year and a half, 2 years, and he could be fighting with guys like Khamzat Chimaev and other guys at the top of the division. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah. Warley is pretty dangerous in that first round. So if you like him, I'd probably take him first round because he does have that nasty guillotine and he's got some power in his hands. So dangerous in the first round. I expect Ikram to, try to probably play it slow, not overextend himself on anything too crazy. Be cautious of the takedowns with that guillotine and maybe find a round 2 finish. But if not, I think he gets it done in round 1. Bantamweight bout, Saeed Nurmagomedov coming in at minus 225 against Muin Gafurov, sitting at plus 185. Over under 2.5 rounds, plus 105 for the over, minus 135 for the under. Saeed Nurmagomedov, 31 years of age for him, 4-1 in his last 5. You see the record there, 17-3. Muin Gafurov, 3-2 in his last 5. 27 years of age for him, and he is making his second fight in the UFC. He took his first fight on short notice against John Castaneda. That was the fight with the big Tajik card, I guess. He had Mohamed Naimov and Muin Gafurov. Both guys taking it on short notice, but he's coming in here, lost the decision to Castaneda. So he's 0-1 in the UFC. Made his Contender Series fight against Chad Hellinger back in 2021. He was a minus 450 favorite. Ended up losing by a split decision. And Hellinger was not supposed to win that fight by any means. I think he was like 34 or 35 when he fought Muin Gafurov, and it seemed like a clear setup. Like Gafurov should win this fight and get into the UFC. Ends up losing, finds his way back into the UFC. Saeed Nurmagomedov lost his last fight to Jonathan Martinez in a very close one. A lot of people think he won, but before that, he was on a 4-fight win streak with 3 of those coming by finish, 2 of them by sub, and 1 knockout. So the guy's got a dangerous submission game, very flashy striking on the feet. I would expect him to probably keep this one on the feet. Most of his submissions come, on a takedown defense, throws in a guillotine. And I think that could probably come into play here because Muin Gafurov does look to take the fight to the ground. Kind of got some wild striking, just very unorthodox, kind of throws it to land a takedown. And if he does shoot, he's got to be cautious of that neck because Saeed's got some skinny arms and he'll find a way to throw that under the neck. So I think Saeed probably wins this one. I kind of like the sub prop. I'm interested to see what it is when it comes out. But I think he's just levels above Gafurov at this point. The only thing that scares me is like Saeed doesn't have the most volume on the feet. So if it does go to a decision and Gafurov is the more, active fighter throughout the fight, it scares me a little bit for the decision, but I do think he gets a win. What are you thinking on this one?
Yeah, no, you touched on the volume thing, and that's what I was kind of thinking too with Saeed, but you look at Gafurov so far in the UFC and you look at his stats, like he only lands 3 significant strikes per minute. but it's also when he's either grappling and wrestling or he's getting taken down, like by Castaneda 3 times, and he's not able to really, stand and let the hands fly. But for Saeed, I've been really high on him his last, 5 fights. I thought he beat Martinez. He had 3 takedowns himself in there, a couple of submission attempts, and outlanded him by 10 strikes. And, if he gets that win, I think he's a pretty big favorite here against Gafurov, who, loses on the Contender Series, loses his debut fight, one by unanimous decision, the other by split. But Saeed, even though he's not a guy that's going to go out there and just aggressively put this pace on you with punches and kicks, like he is super slick when he does let the hands and feet go. Like he can kick. He throws a lot of spinning kicks. And when he gets you up against the cage, first of all, he's hard to take down. But if he gets on top, like you mentioned, he's got those skinny arms. He finds ways to get under the neck. And when he locks things in, like guys aren't really getting out of it. I've been impressed with him so far. One thing I do think he'll have on his side here is a speed advantage over Gafurov. I think Gafurov on the feet's more of those, that wild swinging, hooking shots, where Saeed's going to keep it technical, really quick, really fast. And I think you're going to see a little bit of a striking advantage here for Saeed. If it goes to the ground, one thing with Saeed, I don't think he's easily controllable on the ground. I think Gafurov would struggle keeping him where he wants it to with the control. And if Saeed can reverse position and get on top, Saeed's just slick everywhere. So, yeah, I think this is Nurmagomedov. I'm fairly confident in this one. Everything I've watched on both guys just show me that Saeed should be better anywhere this fight goes.
Yeah, I like him. I'll take him for the pick. And we'll move on to the flyweight featured prelim. Tim Elliott coming in at plus 370 against Mokaev, sitting at minus 495. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 175 for the over, plus 145 for the under. The undefeated 23-year-old Mokaev coming back after nearly getting his knee torn off against Jafel Filio. And after that, goes ahead and submits the guy with like seconds left on the clock. No knee, still finds a rear naked choke to get his third finish in the UFC. And his debut was against Cody Durden. Hit him with a flying knee in the first like 30 seconds and then found a guillotine choke and got that finish in under a minute. It looked like he was going to be a world beater. And then his next couple fights were a bit disappointing as far as, the dominance. But, I mean, he's still been fairly dominant. But, the hype around him might be a little bit disappointing when you look at his performances. Tim Elliott, 4-1 in his last 5. And you look at his last fight against Victor Altamirano, just spamming takedowns. Like the guy is just an absolute workhorse with the takedowns. So these are two mainly grapplers. And I'm interested to see how Tim Elliott's ground game, stacks up against Mokaev, because Mokaev has looked like he clearly wants to take the fight to the ground. And he's used that grinding style to just hold you up against the cage, work for takedowns, kind of just wear you out. I don't know if that's going to work against Tim Elliott because he's kind of got a similar style and maybe a style that can counter this style. So it's an interesting fight. I mean, it's a wide line, but Tim Elliott's been around for a while. He's a vet. Mokaev, young, and coming off that injury, it's a little concerning. What are you thinking on this one?
Yeah, this will be Tim Elliott's 19th UFC fight, and he's landed a takedown in 17 of those fights, which is impressive. Shows you the caliber of wrestling and grappling he has. And honestly, he's got the style that should be able to hang or beat Muhammad Mokaev. The only question is, he's 37 years old now. Mokaev's 23, 22 or 23. Like that's a little bit of concern that maybe Elliott, isn't as quick, isn't as explosive or strong as some of these young guys who have shown that they have damn good ground games and grappling skills. If Tim Elliott, though, I know his game plan is to wrestle and grapple, but if he keeps this on the feet and he can push that pace and land some good shots, I think you get Muhammad Mokaev really uncomfortable. Because if you look at Mokaev's fights, every single one in the UFC, he's never landed more than 22 significant strikes in a fight. That's because he's always looking for the takedown. He's always trying to wrestle and grapple guys and get them down to the ground. If you can stuff that attack and keep him on the feet, I think, like I said, I think you make him extremely uncomfortable. He's never really fought in that style of fight. He's never really fought a vet like Tim Elliott, who has honestly looked pretty good lately. He, quietly, he's 4-1 in his last 5 fights, with his only loss being the Mateusz Nicolau, who was probably a title contender up until his loss with Brandon Royval. So impressive stuff lately from Tim Elliott. I hope he wins here. Mokaev started out really hot in the UFC. I thought Filio had it won in the last fight. I was rooting for Filio in that fight. But, he's tough. He showed he's tough too. Like, he's not going to be easy to submit for Tim Elliott. He's not going to be easy to control, especially in the first couple of rounds for Tim Elliott. But if there's anybody or any style that can get it done, it's the style that Tim Elliott possesses. So I think it gets really interesting as this fight goes on. If Mokaev fighting in front, probably more of a home field advantage here for him. That comes with a lot of nerves. Mokaev, if he slows down against Tim Elliott, Going to be interested to see what happens, because Tim Elliott's going to be in your face for all 3 rounds. You're going to have to damn near kill him to get him out of there. And, on the ground, he's going to match up better than anybody so far with Mokaev. So I think Mokaev wins, giving him for the pick, but I will be rooting for Tim Elliott in this matchup.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, Mokaev's probably going to be the pick for me, but I don't like it, especially at that price tag. Because Tim Elliott, he'll fight for your dollar, man. Like, you saw the fight against Tagir Ulanbekov back at UFC 272. He was a 2-1 underdog. Ulanbekov, another Dagestani, and he just made that fight dirty. Like, he was doing everything he could to win. There's probably a lot of illegal stuff he did, but he pulled off the win. And at that big of a price, it's like Tim Elliott might make the card just based off the fact that he's a grinder. He'll fight for your dollar, and Mokaev hasn't looked, amazing. I mean, he's been such a big favorite against these guys like Charles Johnson, used -500, Malcolm Gordon -1400, and then against Jafel Filio -1000. He's gonna be a big favorite in most fights. So eventually, the O's got to go. Eventually, will it be against Tim Elliott? We'll see, but. Yeah, Mokaev would be the pick. Don't like the price. I don't think I'll bet it whatsoever.
There's value on Tim. Yeah, for sure.
Lightweight bout. Trevor Peek coming in at -130 against Muhammad Yahya, sitting at even money. Over under 1.5 rounds. -115 for the over, -115 for the under. Trevor Peek took his first loss his last time out against Chepe Mariscal. So he is 8-1. Muhammad Yahya making his debut. The thing I hate about these is, like, you don't know his age. Like, there's no – I tried to find it too. It's like I don't know his age. So, is he some 35-year-old that's, getting the shot because he represents the UAE and he just wants to get into the UFC? Possibly. And based off the film that we've seen on Muhammad Yahya, it's not super impressive. And he's 12-3 in his professional career. He's on a 5-fight win streak. A lot of them come by decision. He's been fighting UAE Warriors for a while. I don't know. Just based off the film, I'm not super impressed. Trevor Peek, obviously a fan favorite. The style is super fun to watch. You never know what's going to happen. The guy's an absolute stud when it comes to heart. Like, the way he could take a shot is insane. The way he can give a shot is insane. I'm excited to watch him fight, as most people are. Trevor Peek is a slight favorite. I don't know where to put him after that loss against Chepe. Chepe is not a bad opponent, but, like, there's obvious holes within Trevor Peek's game. I don't think Muhammad Yahya is going to be able to exploit them here. So I got a feeling Trevor Peek's going to get a win here. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Trevor Peek wins too. And like you said, man, Muhammad Yahya's tape is not that impressive. He doesn't do anything extraordinary. Like, he's got a little pop in his shots, but I feel like it's going to take a lot more than that to put Trevor Peek out. And if you talk about guys who have heart and will fight every single second of every 3 rounds, no matter how tired he gets, like, Trevor Peek is the poster boy of that. He's probably one of the biggest dogs in the UFC. And I think that could take him far here. From what I've seen from Muhammad, when he gets into those long fights, he slows down a little bit. He's hittable. And, there's a guy named Hassan Talal and it was Desert Force 25 that showed that he can get touched. And, if you hit him hard enough, the guy will fall. And Trevor Peek hits extremely hard. We've seen it over and over again. Might not be that technical. It might not look the best. It might be standing hammer fists, but he will find the chin and has some pop on his shots. I just think Also, like if you're the UFC, who do you want to win this fight? Is it Muhammad Yahya, a guy that nobody has really even heard of, or hasn't really been on anybody's radar unless you really, really follow other promotions in the Middle East? Or is it Trevor Peek, who everybody talks about up and like leading up to every single card or after every fight, and they play the highlight tape and his performance? I think it's Trevor Peek. The UFC wants Trevor Peek to win. He's a lot more marketable than Muhammad Yahya will be. He'll make a lot more money for the UFC than Muhammad, and this is a big card on a big stage. So I think they matchmaking wise, I think this sets up for Trevor Peek to hopefully find that KO here.
Yeah, I think so too. And considering he's so new to MMA, you got to figure he's getting better at everything as time moves on. So I like him here to win. The only thing that scares me is like if Muhammad Yahya has some type of submission game. Hasn't really shown it too much, but I don't think he will come out and pull that. Based on the film, he kind of just stands and strikes with guys. So it makes in some wrestling, it's not like anything crazy. So yeah, I think Trevor Peek gets this one done. And if he does put that round one barrage on him early, I think Muhammad Yahya could fold to that because not a lot of people can take that. Chepe Mariscal is a dog as well. So I mean, I figured Chepe would be able to take those punches and come back with some of his own. And I picked him to win, and he won. I think Trevor Peek should be able to get this guy out of there eventually. So I'll take him for the pick. Bantamweight bout, Victor Henry coming in at plus 400 against Javid Basharat, sitting at minus 600. Under 2.5 rounds, minus 260 for the over, plus 210 for the under. The undefeated Javid Basharat, 14-0, 28 years of age for him. Victor Henry, 36 years of age for him. And I mean, he's got a wealth of MMA experience. This will be his 30th fight on his professional career. He's coming in as a big underdog, but Javid Basharat is looked at as one of the better prospects in the 135 division. He is 3-0 in the UFC, all wins by decision. His Contender Series fight back in 2021, he won in a round 3 guillotine choke. The way that he fights, super technical, super calculated, and you see that in a lot of his fights. I mean, he's not going to take too many risks. He will mix in the takedowns on the feet. Great jab, sticks and moves really nicely. And he's gotten a lot of finishes on the regional scene, but it seems like once he's got to the UFC, he's having trouble putting these guys away. And Victor Henry never been finished in his long professional career. So I'm sure Javid wants to come in here and get a finish because he hasn't in his last 3 fights, but it's going to be tough going up against Victor Henry, who's never been finished. So it might look a little bit closer than the odds entail, considering Victor Henry has looked fairly good in the UFC. I mean, he's coming off loss or back-to-back losses, I believe, but on the feet, I mean, he's got some pretty dang good striking, and he throws a lot of volume at you. The real he's coming off a win against Tony Gravely. Before that, he lost to Rafael Assunção. But the real weakness he's shown is getting taken down. So I would expect Javid to exploit that in this fight and probably, try to make it less subjective to the judges if it does go there. Because on the feet, Henry can put up 154 against Tony Gravely, 181 against Jaime Barcelos. Those were his 2 wins. The only fight that he lost, got taken down twice, and that striking was kind of just, thrown out the door because he was on his back. So I would expect Javid to take the fight to the ground and have some success there and find a win. But on the feet, it gets a little bit dicey. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think Victor Henry, if he does keep it on the feet, this fight, odds-wise, is a lot closer. And even though, in his first 3 fights, he's been taken down 6 times, has Victor Henry. But he's still got an 80% takedown defense. And if you watch the fights, like he gets taken down a few times, but he also stuffs a hell of a lot of takedowns too. Like his takedown defense isn't necessarily bad when you really dive in and watch the tape. On the feet against Basharat, like Basharat is so technical sometimes to where, he's not like really letting go, and you don't see these big flurries that, he throws up bunches and bunches of punches with Victor Henry. If he hits you one time and gets you a little wobbled or backs you up, he's not going to stop until you either shoot a takedown or you can crack him back to kind of stop him in his tracks. Like, this dude's volume is so impressive. Through 3 fights in the UFC, averages over 8.5 significant strikes per minute. Like, that's unheard of. You go look at other people's stats who have 3 fights in the UFC, you're not going to find many, if any, that have that many significant strikes landed per minute. And he hits them at a 54% clip. So he's throwing over 15, over 16 per minute, which is wild. And if he can do that and this fight stays on the feet, he might eat a few shots because of how slick Basharat's boxing is and how accurate he can be. But, overall, he's probably going to be the one landing more in this fight while it takes place standing. Makes it interesting. Like, I think he's going to get taken down a few times, but, in his back pocket is good jiu-jitsu. Victor Henry has good jiu-jitsu as well. I think it's going to make it tough for Basharat to submit him. I think it's going to give Victor Henry chances to, grab a hold of the neck to maybe possibly work back up to his feet. And on the feet's where he's going to do his best work. I think Javid should win this fight. Like, the odds, I don't like the odds whatsoever. If I'm just picking who wins the fight, I think Basharat is going to be more composed and technical. And he's seen this style before. He's got a lot of good experience on his record and should win. But, man, at big plus money, it's hard to pick against the guy who, from start to finish, is just going to be in your face, trying to hit you. It looks good to the judges, and it makes it super interesting. So, yeah, give me Javid, but I'm interested to see how this one actually plays out.
Yeah, you might, within the first couple minutes, get a better read on this one as far as where these guys stack up. Obviously, the odds are saying Basharat should smoke him on the feet. I don't feel great about that. But, Basharat's brother, Fareed, was coming off 2 decisions and then went out there and submitted the guy in the first round. So Javid by sub might be an interesting take here, but Victor Henry, BJJ black belt, he's got some pretty good submission defense, never been finished. So in the real odds, this fight's probably going to go to a decision, and I'll take Basharat for the pick. Middleweight bout, Cedriques Dumas coming in at -205 against Abu Azaitar, sitting at +170. Over under 1.5 rounds, -175 for the over, +145 for the under. 8-1 in his career for Dumas, coming off a win, and 4-1 in his last 5 for Abu Azaitar, but he's been off for a while. You see the age there, 37 years of age for him, and 28 for Cedriques Dumas, and you see the height and reach advantage for Dumas. Coming into this one, Abu Azaitar has not fought since 2021. That was in March. He took a loss to Marc-Andre Barriault, got finished in the 3rd round. We all know the cardio of Barriault is pretty dang good, so a finish in the 3rd round doesn't look too bad. And early on in the fight, he looked pretty decent. Dumas got the fraud check in his UFC debut against Josh Fremd, got guillotined in the 2nd round. Bounces back with a win against Cody Brundage in kind of a snoozer. Like, that was supposed to be somewhat of an exciting fight. Like, Dumas has this exciting style on the feet, kickboxer, and going to throw a lot of like weird stuff at you. And then Cody Brundage basically laid on his back for most of the fight, and Dumas got the win by decision. So coming into this one, I'm not too sure like what to think about Dumas because he got exposed on the ground against Fremd, and then he got a kind of a gifted win against Cody Brundage. So I don't know. What are you thinking?
Yeah, it's hard to get a read on like how good Cedriques is or how good he's going to be against Josh Fremd. Like, loses by sub 2nd round, after the first 30 seconds, didn't really look that good in that fight. And then Josh Fremd has gone on to not look like the best either at the UFC level. So that's not the best loss in the world. Cody Brundage isn't the best win in the world. I mean, Cody Brundage jumped guillotine. Cedriques was able to reverse position, get on top, and basically just hold that position for the whole entire fight. I mean, he only landed 17 significant strikes in a 3-round bout to Cody Brundage's 3. So we haven't really seen what happens, if fights get extended and it's on the feet and you're actually fighting with guys. Abu Azaitar, on the feet, like early in fights against Marc-Andre Barriault, even, he landed some good shots. I mean, even over the course of that fight, 3 rounds, ended in the 3rd at the last second, but he landed over 100 significant strikes against Marc-Andre Barriault, who maybe doesn't have the best striking defense, but still, I mean, it's a good opponent that you landed all those shots against. If he keeps it on the feet, which I expect him to against Cedriques Dumas, he's going to be a little shorter. It's going to be tougher for him to close that distance. But if he does land, like, he has some pop in his shots. He's heavy-handed. He's a thick dude. So it makes it really interesting. Cedriques Dumas, this fight sets up for him to win, in my opinion. Azaitar has been off for, outside of Marc-Andre Barrios. That was 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. And then before that, he hadn't fought in 3 years before that. So it's like, this dude's not very active. If he can't win in the first round, I would think Cedriques Dumas goes on and, wins the decision or some kind of finish later in the fight. But Dumas there's so many unknowns with him still. I wish we knew more about him to this point, but there's just been nothing in his fights that really show you how good of a fighter he is, how good he could be, and what he's going to really look like against UFC level competition. So I think Dumas gets it done, just for the fact that Azaitar, he's older, not very active at all, could fade in this fight after the first round, and not really confident to bet either way, though.
Yeah, I mean, I gonna take Dumas for the pick, but at -200, I'm like, I don't think I could take that. That's pretty chalky. Like, the last fight, I think he was a dog against Cody Brundage, and I was like, all right, take a dog shot on him because he's got some potential. But a 2-1 favorite here against a guy in a Azaitar he is 37 and shorter, not as long, but it's just a Gracie fight. It's like, do you really want to take that or throw your money on that? We got 13 fights. It's probably not one I'll get too invested in. So, yeah, Dumas will be the pick for me, but a sketchy one at that. A lightweight bout, Mike Breeden coming in at +260 against Anshul Jubli, sitting at -360. Over under 1.5 rounds, -185 for the over, +155 for the under. The undefeated Anshul Jubli, the Indian fighter, the lone Indian on the roster, 28 years of age for him. Mike Breeden, 10-6 in his professional career, 2-3 in his last 5. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, 34 years of age for him. And coming in as an underdog in this one, based on his last fight against Terrence McKinney. The guy doesn't like to get hit because got hit with Terrence and folded within 90 seconds. It's not the worst thing because Terrence McKinney is an early finisher. And if he hits you early, you're probably going down. But before that, a loss by decision to Natan Levy. And then he got knocked out by Alexander Hernandez in 80 seconds. So Alexander Hernandez finished him faster than Terrence McKinney. To get into the UFC, he took the fight on short notice against Alexander Hernandez and then loses 3 straight. Anshul Jubli won the Road to the UFC championship back in February against Jeka Sergey. He got a round 2 ground and pound finish and got the UFC contract. The lone Indian on the roster. I got a feeling, the UFC probably wants to tap into that market a little bit here. So it seems to me like this is somewhat of a setup fight for Anshul Jubli to get a win based on Mike Breeden taking a short notice fight to get in the UFC and then losing 3 straight. It seems like they're shedding the roster here with Mike Breeden, considering he is 34 years of age as well. Anshul Jubli, I think he's got, a lot of improvements to make in his game, but I do think he probably wins this one. The wrestling looked good against Sergey based on the fact that Sergey has no wrestling. And the striking is decent. It's not like anything crazy. He's not going to go out there and spark Mike Breeden by any means. Jubli's got a decent jab, and he'll I don't want to say he's technical, but he's not going to like huck bombs. And then the takedown game is pretty decent. So I think he gets a win. It's a little hefty of a price tag, but I don't see a way that Mike Breeden goes in there and gets a win when this is what we've seen at the UFC level. So I'll take it. What do you got?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Jubli should win the fight. But the one thing that worries me is, like, this is Mike Breeden's last chance. He's on a 3-fight losing streak, never won in the UFC. He loses this to a guy who's making his second fight, like, you're getting cut. So a guy like that can be dangerous. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to come in there. He's going to try to take Jubli's head off. He's going to do anything he can to win this fight. But, you talked about it too. The UFC, Anshul Jubli, is a perfect guy for their roster just because that market is almost untapped. Would he be like the only either like there can't be more than 2 or 3 fighters, Indian fighters in the UFC right now.
He's the only one.
He's the okay, so yeah, only one. Like that's important for the UFC. A win from him is the best case possible here. But Breeden, I don't want to say he's tough because he's been knocked out in 2 of his 3 UFC fights. But if you do leave him at space and you let him strike with you, like the guy has decent volume. I mean, he outlanded Natan Levy 104 to 92. It was just the takedowns that were a problem in that fight. I don't see Jubli coming in here and landing a ton of takedowns. Like he took down Jekka Sergi, but Sergi sucked with the takedown defense that he has in a lot of his fights. Jubli was taken down 4 times in his fight before that on road to the UFC. So, I mean, it's like he's not a wrestler by any means. I don't think that's going to be his game plan against Mike Breeden here. So if you can't knock him out and you can't do damage, you kind of let Mike Breeden into the fight a little bit. Mike Breeden has 10 wins on his record. 8 of them come by KO, and which shows you he does have some power. Some of them are liver shots. I mean, some of them have been somewhat impressive knockouts, although not to the best MMA competition by any means. But, at this price tag, I don't really like Jubli at this price, considering we've seen him against one guy in the UFC in Jekka Sergi, and honestly wasn't real high on Jekka after watching that performance or anything before that fight. So I think it's interesting. I think Jubli should be the clear winner, but at these odds, it just puts it in your mind like, Mike Breeden fighting for his career here. It makes him a little bit dangerous. So I'll take Jubli for the pick, betting-wise. Probably going to stay away from this one as well.
I just checked. Anshel Jubli has almost 500,000 followers on Instagram. We know Instagram followers don't win you fights, but I think this is a setup job for Jubli to get a win because there's an obvious market in India to get somewhat of at least a face in the UFC for India. So I'll take him. Featherweight bout, Nathaniel Wood coming in at minus 335 against Muhammad Naimov, sitting at plus 245. Over under 2.5 rounds, minus 160 for the over, plus 130 for the under. Muhammad Naimov made his UFC debut up at lightweight on short notice against Jamie Malarkey and knocked him out in the second round. Jamie Malarkey, not known for his chin, but he was a minus 400 favorite against Muhammad Naimov, and he gets knocked out. So going into this one against Nathaniel Wood, he's got to be cautious of that power. And Nathaniel Wood has shown over his past few fights and his UFC career. I mean, this is going to be his 10th UFC fight. So he's been in the UFC for a while. He was at bantamweight, moved up to featherweight. Looks like it's going to be a good move for him. Moving forward, he was killing himself to make weight. And ever since he moved up to featherweight, he's looked pretty darn good. Last win against Andre Fili, that was back in July, and he won by decision. I would probably say a step down in competition here against Naimov. Fili's a vet, and he's good everywhere the fight goes. He got cracked by Wood cracked Fili in the first round, and then I think Fili went and cracked him in the second round. The thing that does scare me is Nathaniel Wood is somewhat hittable on the feet. Like he does throw a ton of volume at you. He's got really slick boxing, and I think he should be able to win this fight. But once again, Naimov has overcome the odds before, and it only takes one. And at those odds, I don't really like it too much. But I do think Wood gets the win. Should be able to use the jab, use the boxing, and get a win. Naimov was getting outboxed by Jamie Malarkey before he knocked him out. So there is that. But what are you seeing in this one?
Yeah, he was definitely getting outboxed by Jamie Malarkey and taken down a couple of times. And, Jamie, that chin, man, if it would have held up, he'd have got that win. I mean, I think Naimov was slowing down, but it came out in that round. And, he was looking to take Jamie Malarkey's head off because that was his only path to victory. And he got it done. I think he's a good fighter who is going to have fights in the UFC. But Nathaniel Wood is like, you go from beating Jamie Malarkey, and now you got to fight Nathaniel Wood, who is pretty quick on the feet. He's got good leg kicks. Like it's a tough fight for him because Wood will mix in trips and takedowns himself. Like he's a good, well-rounded fighter. And if he fights like he did against Charles Jourdain, I think he's going to have a lot of success here. be cautious of the power coming at you. He fought with kind of a higher guard and, on the feet looked really solid. However, against Andre Fili in his last fight, he got cracked and had the whole entire crowd in London thinking that their boy Nathaniel Wood was about to get beat by Fili in the first round. So if he's not careful, I mean, Naimov, even though Malarkey's chinny, like the shot he landed on Malarkey puts a lot of people out. Right on the button, straight down the middle, like beautiful shot. So if he can land stuff like that, he's definitely got a chance against Wood. But I think Wood wins this fight. I've been pretty high on Wood. Did make me a little bit nervous in that first round with Fili, but outside of that, he's looked pretty damn good. So yeah, give me Wood here. I think it's a little bit too much too soon for Naimov, but I mean, you just never know, man. Naimov's beaten the guy Landon Quinones, who just lost to Nasrat Haqparast. Like, it's not like he has bad experience or hasn't fought decent fighters, because he has. But again, I just think Nathaniel Wood just a little bit too much too soon. But I mean, I'm guessing this is probably closer to Naimov's territory than Nathaniel Wood, so you got that factor as well. So never know, but I just can't bet against Nathaniel Wood here.
Yeah, Naimov trains at Elevation Fight Team, which is a great camp in Denver, Colorado. That's Gaethje. Usman spends time there as well. So he's at a good camp. I would assume he's only getting better. But against this one, against Nathaniel Wood, another thing I don't like for Nathaniel Wood is, like, why are you taking this fight?
Right.
Like, what's the point of this fight? Like, Nathaniel Wood, I don't know, maybe he just wants, more experience after that Fili fight or whatever, but you're going into enemy territory, basically.
Yeah.
And it just seems like something to me, it's like it's a letdown performance, like it could be a lot closer than these odds entail. But based off the numbers, like, Wood should be able to outstrike him on the feet. Naimov, it almost looks like he was looking for that one shot against Malarkey, kind of fights off the back foot. He could find it in this fight. Wood will be the pick for me. But yeah, I'm a little sketched out by this one. Strawweight bout, Victoria Dudakova coming in at -600 against Jin Yu Frey, sitting at +400. Over under 2.5 rounds, -250 for the over, +200 for the under. The undefeated Dudakova coming in 24 years of age against the 38 years of age in Jin Yu Frey. You see the professional record there, 11-9. She's inching closer to that 500 record. And at 38 years of age, it's probably ain't getting any better. Victoria Dudakova, big favorite in this one. She is 24, but I would assume she's getting better. Jin Yu Frey, 3-fight losing streak. Her only wins in the past 3 years are Gloria DePaula and Ashley Yoder. Ashley Yoder likely going to be cut if she hasn't been already after her last performance. She is 8-9 now in her professional career. So she's kind of facing the bottom of the barrel. And Victoria Dudakova, she picked up a win by injury her last time out. She was a 2-1 favorite in that one. But then her fight on the Contender Series was pretty impressive, considering I'm pretty sure she blew out her knee on that one. And she came in as a +220 dog against another undefeated fighter in Maria Silva. So that's, it looks better. And that's her only win by decision. So she's been finishing these girls on the regional scene, a lot of them by submission. Jin Yu Frey has been submitted before once. She's been knocked out 3 times. So she can be finished. And at 38 years of age, I would assume, she's not trying to hold on to anything too crazy. She's not going to, make any title runs in the future. So I think Dudakova wins this one. I honestly think she finishes her. The under is +200 or something like that. I think the Dudakova being that big of a favorite should be able to go in there and finish her. Jin Yu Frey fought at, I think it's atom weight, 105 before. So she's not a big girl. I mean, she looks physically strong, but when you watch her fight, it's not like she's bullying chicks around there. So I think Dudakova gets some takedowns and should be able to put her away. But, we're talking women's MMA finishes. It's not always the easiest thing. So what are you thinking on this one?
Yeah, Victoria Dudakova, her game plan is going to be obvious. She's going to come forward. She's going to want to get takedowns and do work on the ground. I mean, she's always looking for a finish though, and she's aggressive too with it. You look at I think she's got 7-0, 6 of those come by finish. I think it's 4 submissions, 3 or sorry, 3 submissions, 2 finishes or 2 KOs. Either way, I mean, she's an aggressive fighter. Jenny Frey, though, you look at her takedown defense and it's 89%, and she likes to grapple a little bit herself from time to time. And, that's a pretty good takedown defense considering, she has a fair amount of fights in the UFC. She's harder to take down. And, if Dudakova can't get her to the ground, we're going to have to see what she's got on the feet too. I mean, I think it's good. We just haven't seen it at this level much yet. And, if she can't get the takedown, I think we're going to see a boring fight with Dudakova coming forward and just getting her up against the cage, hanging on, looking for the single leg, looking for the double leg, getting stuffed, maybe getting one here or there with Jinh Frey bouncing back up to her feet and rinse and repeat. Like, I don't really think we're in for a real exciting fight here by any means.
Oh, no.
But one that Dudakova should be in the driver's seat and in control of the whole time. Frey, you mentioned her 2 wins in the UFC. Doesn't look good, especially now with Ashley Yoder losing like that last week, getting just absolutely butchered on the feet. That's a bad one. Her last loss against Elise Reed, who Elise Reed has wins, at least in the UFC, but she's got 4 losses, and every single one of those come by finish. Like, that's kind of unheard of in women's MMA, a girl getting finished that many times.
Yeah.
Polyana Viana lost to her. Polyana's coming off of a loss. Vanessa Demopoulos won her last fight, but some losses before that. So just nothing real impressive about Jin, and Victoria Dudakova has a higher ceiling. She's got a lot of upside, and I think just overall more tools, more grit, and has the ability to grind out the win, even if she can't get the takedowns of the whole fight. So yeah, give me Victoria here.
Yeah, if Jinh Frey had better striking on the feet, I'd be more inclined to look at the dog here, but it just really hasn't been anything that I've seen that I'm like in the last fight with Dudakova, I think we both took Estela Nunes. She ended up breaking her arm, but Estela Nunes has some pretty solid striking. So we're like, if this fight stays on the feet, she could make Dudakova uncomfortable there. But
yeah,
I don't see that out of Jinh Frey. So I'm going to go with Dudakova. Not saying anything crazy. She's minus 600. Don't love the price, but yeah, she'll be the pick. Middleweight bout here. Bruno Silva coming in at plus 190 against the debuting Sharapoutin Magomedov, sitting at minus 230. Over under 1.5 rounds. Minus 130 for the over. Even money on the under. The undefeated Sharapoutin, or Sharabullet, I should say, 11-0. And you see the height there, 6'2". Bruno Silva, 2-3 in his last 5. 34 years of age for him. He's coming in here. I mean, it's an interesting matchup, like right off the bat, to throw Magomedov against Bruno Silva, who's been fighting some pretty top-level guys. I mean, he just lost to Brendan Allen, and he's fought Alex Pereira, and he's fought Brad Tavares, knocked out Brad Tavares. He's kind of been up and down. Like, the wins he had early on in his UFC career, kind of the bottom of the barrel. Wellington Turman, Andrew Sanchez, Jordan Wright. Face him up against Pereira, loses a decision. Then everyone's high on him going up against Gerald Meerschaert, and he just completely looks terrible and actually should have got knocked out by Gerald Meerschaert, but Meerschaert throws in the guillotine and then knocks out Brad Tavares and then gets subbed by Brendan Allen. Got knocked down in that one as well. Based on his official results, he's never been knocked out. But he's been knocked down and then subbed. So it's like the chin isn't like some granite chin where this guy can just take a shot and be unfazed. He can get phased by shots, but he just eventually gives his neck instead of getting TKO'd. So, yeah, if you're looking at the stats, you look into him a little bit more. But in this one against Magomedov, like, this is a guy that people have been talking about because he looks scary. He's got the crazy eye. And a lot of his KOs are pretty, viral KOs where you can look at it and be like, oh my God, this guy looks pretty crazy. Coming in as a favorite, though, in his debut against a guy who's been fighting, top 15 guys. So it's an interesting one. What do you think?
I'm so excited for this fight. And first of all, props to the UFC for making this the first fight on the prelims. Like, this is how they should open up every single card. Normally, it's a lower level women's MMA or two debuters, but here, like, you're getting violence from the get-go in this fight. You're getting two strikers, two guys who have knockouts. I mean, Shara Putin, 11 wins, 0 losses, 10 KOs on his record. That just screams like excitement, and I'm excited to watch him fight. But Bruno Silva, 4-3 in the UFC, and all 4 of his wins are by KO too. I think for this, Bruno, it depends how he comes out in this fight. In all of his losses, like, he's not aggressive. Like, against Brendan Allen, he wasn't real aggressive. He kind of backing up. Same thing with Gerald Meerschaert. Only landed 29 significant strikes in that fight. When he's the striker and Gerald's the grappler. Gerald's one who knocked him down, got the submission after that. And against Alex, that's kind of an excusable loss because of how good Alex Pereira is. And he showed toughness in that fight, even though he kind of got beat around pretty good. But if he comes out aggressive here and really looks to be the aggressor and the one marching forward in this fight, I think he could have some success. Shara Putin, if you watch his tape, yeah, he's got a lot of highlight KOs. He lands really good shots. He's really good with the kicks, but he also gets hit when he's trying to land those kicks at times. Yeah, other times, he's not really getting hurt in there, but guys are finding the chin. And guys like Bruno Silva hold a lot of power and have been fighting at the UFC level for a bit now. So that makes it interesting. Shara Putin, too. It just seems like lately when these guys have a lot of hype, it's a little much pressure when they get into the UFC and they get into the fight. And sometimes they just can't handle it or they weren't ready. Like, I'm really surprised the UFC is giving him a guy like Bruno Silva, who has 7 UFC fights, who has a ton of power and can crack the chin of anybody he fights. Shara Putin should be a guy they want to build and make a name off of. And now you're kind of risking him to, have a bad first performance against a decent opponent. So super interesting stuff. I do think if Magomedov handles everything well and holds his composure in there, he should, cruise to a win here, be the better striker, probably more technical striker, and land, I think, the cleaner shots. But there's just always that off chance with Silva that he does find your chin and he puts you out. So it's interesting. It's betting wise, it's like, do I take the dog here? If I take the dog and he loses, I look extremely stupid, and people are going to say, yeah, Shara is the future. What were you thinking? Type of thing. But again, it could go to where, Bruno Silva shocks everybody and Magomedov just wasn't ready for this level of competition. So I'm going to take Shara Putin. I do think he is really good. Like, you watch his tape and his credentials and everything in striking are top tier and really, really good. And his opponents' combined records are good too. It's not like he's fighting complete bums or anything. But man, Bruno Silva could be a live dog early in this fight.
Yeah, I'm shocked they made this matchup too. If you look at the betting odds, Bruno Silva was actually less of an underdog against Alex Pereira, which is interesting. But the way this fight goes, it's like Bruno Silva does a lot of work with the hands. Magomedov does a lot of work with the kicks. He really fights behind the kicks and really tries to keep you at range with them, and then will blitz with the hands and hit you hard. If Bruno Silva, the way he fights, he's usually pretty downhill. I mean, he kind of just throws a lot at you, and if he hits you, like, you're gonna feel it. Like, he's got a ton of KOs on his record, so it's a scary opponent to go up against in your debut. But Magomedov has been fighting some pretty solid guys on the regional scene. Like 21-5, 16-4, and he's winning these fights. So it really just speaks to like where the UFC sees this guy moving forward. If they're going to match him up with Bruno Silva off the rip, I'm really interested to watch this one and see what happens. I don't know if I could get to that chalk on Share a Bullet, and Bruno Silva is definitely going to be live early. But once again, it's one of these fights where you're probably going to feel out where these odds should be within the first like minute or two. You're like, is Bruno Silva landing? Is Magomedov piecing him up with the kicks early? Something like that. So for the pick, I'll go with Magomedov. But it's a sketchy one to start your night. I almost like the under better, just because Bruno Silva, the way he wins fights is like just come forward early and make the guy uncomfortable. Shara Putin could definitely crack him early and put him out. Bruno Silva could put him out early as well. So that's probably a route I might look for instead of taking a side in this one. But for the pick, I'll take Magomedov. And those are the picks for all 13 fights on UFC 294. Can't wait. Once again, early start time. And if you want the official bets, jump on the premium membership. The link is in the description. Gets you every single UFC card every week for less than $1 a day. And if you just want the bets for this week, they'll be posted Friday for one-time instant download. And you'll just get the full sheet with all of our bets there. So got anything else for the viewers before we head out of here?
Man, it's either going to be a dog card or all these dogs are winning, or there's not going to be a lot of betting spots on the money line. But these pay-per-view cards seem to be ones where the craziest shit happens, shit you're not expecting. And I just have a feeling we're in for chaos on Saturday. I cannot wait. Early in the morning card, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of wide lines. So, buyer beware if you're paying too much chalk on a certain fighter or not. But yeah. Other than that, stay up to date at the Double Leg on Instagram. You'll be updated with anything that we have as far as news or any drop on there. At HI Picks on the medias for me. Where can they find you?
All social medias at the Parlay MMA.
If you're watching here on YouTube, drop a sub to support the channel. Hit the like button for us. Till then, till the next video. We'll see you in the Double Leg. We out.